The Hawks Zone rundown continues. Tonight, special guest Brandon Cain from the Hawks Nest podcast. This is a crossover episode. We've been following Brandon's stuff for quite a while now. We just love his stuff. Has great insight. And so he's going to join us, and we're just going to talk what's been happening on camp, some Geno Smith, Sam Howell stuff, DK contract extension possibly, and just get his thoughts on who he thinks is really stepping up in camp, and possibly some surprise cuts, and just get right into it with Brandon. But before Bryce, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just really excited for this week. You and me are going to be heading down to the Seahawk game on Saturday for the Browns game. We're going to go take that game in, and then on top of that, we've got kind of a cool thing happening the following on Sunday, right after the game. We're going to be doing a roundtable live conversation with Dan Viens from Seahawks Forever and Bill and Keith from the Seahawk Playbooks. We're going to take listeners' comments. We're going to kind of do like a roster breakdown, who we think makes this team, because it'll be getting close to cut down day in 2 days, and just have a general long conversation about the preseason, how we see this team going. So, man, apart from that, having Brandon on today, it's going to be a lot of fun this week.
Yeah, it is, man. And we'll just keep rolling along. So, guys, if you're watching the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, go down, hit the subscribe button for us. Come join the family. Hit the like button and notification button so you don't miss future episodes. And, like Bryce said, we get that roundtable live. So anything live, you get notified right away. Come on in. And like you said, we love the Q&A aspect of it too. So yeah, all that stuff, and everybody that's been supporting the channel, we appreciate it. And just gonna keep rolling on here. So on the other side, Brandon Cain from the Hawks Nest.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
For this run. What a run. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a win. Leon Wilson to catch. Geno Smith and Jimbo. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does.
Is it going to be another 9-8?
Mike McDonald got to finish something.
They have to fix the offense.
Part of his success and part of
ambition of being the LOB one a year. That's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the Hawks Zone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Joining us tonight is Brandon Cain from the Hawks Nest podcast. Brandon, we appreciate you coming on, and we've been following your stuff for a while, and it's just a great time to have you on and have this crossover pod happening with us, and just get into it. We've had 2 games so far in the preseason. Camp's in full swing, and we're getting close to the season, man. So, yeah, we appreciate you joining us tonight, talking Hawks.
Happy to join you guys, and I'm sure you guys are getting that same budding excitement feeling in the bottom of your guts about the season just right up around that corner. You're through that long off-season period, and now it's getting real. Now it's just about to count, and the surprise of what we're going to see. We don't know what we're really, truly going to see until we get to that game 1, which just builds the anticipation that much more. But I'm happy to be here, man. It's great having a chance to talk with you guys on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny you brought up the, and the anticipation there, and Bryce and I, obviously 8 months, the McDonald hire, just the whole lead up to it, right? You're talking about, free agency, draft. It just, everything was so new. And then you get to that first game where you finally see Mike on the sidelines, and we were amped. We were amped for game 1, and a lot of pauses that we took out of that. And then game 2 rolled around, and Bryce and I were both kind of like, what'd you think of the game? And it was kind of like, meh, like it's game 2 for the preseason, right? But specifically, we've been sort of zoning in on Sam Howell. A lot of talk about him. We brought him in. It felt like there was a lot of hype, not so much hype, but maybe expectations with him. And do you think, right out of the gate, it was like how terrible he looked at practice and at camp and missing throws? And do you think he sort of felt those expectations a little too much and kind of came in a little tight at camp? Because the first 2 games he showed some nice flashes. Last game, Bryce and I were talking about the dime he dropped to Aesop Winston there for a touchdown, and another throw I think to White there. And just a
Seam
beautiful
route.
throw downfield in that seam route. I mean, those were all pro type throws. What's your overall take so far with Sam? Some of the criticisms and maybe the expectations a little too high with this, considering he is our backup right now.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the quarterback, it's one of the, in my opinion, and I'm pretty strongly opinioned on this, so I got to own this, and that I might be on my own little island on this, but I have a very different outlook at the quarterback position than many others do, where I tend to think that there's a lot of factors that come into play, and people want to get it really simple and easy. Is he trash? Is he good? Can he be that guy? They say terms like that. Is he the guy? What does that mean? Is he the guy? And then then he starts doing some of the things of the guy, and they still go, no, he's still not the guy. He still doesn't do this stuff of it. So when I say that, I say, it's the youth part of it. It's the part you brings up about it, maybe with some of the expectation. It's the changing of offenses and going from a West Coast style offense of what the enemy is going to run to some now of the spread concepts you're trying to bring into play. It's all of that. It's the last year getting battered. I'm a big guy that really, really bangs on this, saying, don't let your quarterbacks get beat up. I want a great offensive line. Don't let that happen, because when it happens, it's not just bad because the offense falls apart. It's not just happens because now you risk major injury to your quarterback. It's bad because it gets in their head. You hear the term seeing ghosts and getting jumpy in the pocket and feeling pressure that's not there. And the thing I never see with that when people bring that up about the quarterback is the other 15 games that came beforehand where the guy was getting drilled every time he stood back there to throw. And so it's all of that on how coming into this camp, I think at once, not to give you guys kind of a generalized answer here, but I think it's, you put all that into the pot a bit and you stir it around, and that's the true heart of what this is, in my opinion. And that's why I've said with Howell, it's got to be more of a patience game here. It's a developmental guy. It's a potential guy for us to be a quarterback in the future. This year, this preseason will determine that. That's what this time frame is for. That's what John Schneider has afforded himself. And if he falls on the face throughout practice, through the season, like he kind of had through the first couple practices I saw, then you can move on and go to a different guy after this year. But if he gets better, slowly improves, people did this with Geno too. Leaves the Jets, trash, garbage, can never be good. He is what he is. He'll never be better than that. Can never ascend to above that. Can never be. This is why, hold on, let the guy have some time to develop. It's the hardest position to play in the whole sport. Why do we think overnight that they should be great, especially a kid that's 23 years old?
Wow, for me, that's like music to my ears, Brandon. That's basically how I've felt about the whole subject of Sam Howell and quarterbacks in general when they come into the league, and that whole thing is, I played the position for 20 years at the collegiate level was where I finished playing. And you're right, the offensive line, biggest factor in that whole, lecture you gave was they have to be good. And you're right. You do see ghosts. You do start imagining that there's pressure there when there isn't pressure. And, I look at Sam. Sam's kind of, to me, gone through the same thing Alex Smith went through when he got to San Francisco. Yeah. 3 coordinators in 3 years. That is not easy to go through as a quarterback. You're learning different terminologies constantly. You never get comfortable. The new regime comes in. You don't know where you stand. I agree. This preseason, huge for him, and he's played well in games. And the things for me in the games that I've seen that I like is he's not putting the ball in harm's way. He's not making some of those throws we saw last year where pressure comes, he gets out of the pocket, and he tries to force to make something happen. He's throwing the ball away. Okay, I'll live for the next down. And so I don't look at it as this Howell versus Geno thing. I look at the same as you do. Is Howell the answer 2 years, 3 years down the line after he's been here? He's been in the system for multiple years under Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald, and then they can have that question. Now, people are going to constantly go with the, is it Geno, is it Sam, so on and so forth. Same kind of thing I look at with Geno is they're both under contract for next year. You don't know how Geno's going to do in this system. We may have more of a true quarterback competition next year in the offseason between Sam and Geno, because there may come a point where John Schneider goes, I want to bring both guys back. And maybe we draft a kid and he's competing with one of them to come in, kind of more of like what happened with Matt Flynn, Tavares Jackson, and Russell Wilson situation back in 2012, where you had 2 veteran guys. Tavares had played well. Matt Flynn was your guy that you brought in. And then you went and drafted a rookie, and the rookie beat out one of the guys. So you traded one of the guys away when we traded Tavares off to Buffalo. That's how I look at this situation more than this year. Sam Howell needs to compete with Geno to start. Let Sam actually just sit for a year, truly get developed by people that understand how to develop quarterbacks, and see what he does next year and the year after.
Agreed. I'm fully in agreement with you on it. And I think that John's done a smart job with this trade and giving himself that timeline, because what happens here is that teams get driven to go get the QB. The fans bang on it. And this is why I'm probably a bit touchy almost at this point, is because I hear so much from my chat. I hear so much from fans. I hear it even from people that are smart football minds that just simplify this ever complicated sport that has 11 football players on the field. And they turn it into that Michael Jordan conceptual view of the quarterback position. Put him out on the wing, let him sit out there and, work and do his one-on-one. And it's like, no, it's all integrated together. I think that Geno's going to have a fantastic season this year, partly because of the stuff we're talking about with Sam Howell. Has the Seahawks pass protection past the first 10 games Geno started 2 years ago onwards been good in your estimation, Bryce? I mean, and that's so we look at Geno, we look at performance he's had over that time. And I'm talking specifically, let's lock in 11th game onwards of 2023. And this whole last season where the pass protection by PFF's account was 28th in the league. I think that matches to our test. I know people are anti-PFF, but hey, that's what my eyes saw. I watched a Cowboys game where it was over 50% pressure rate throughout that game, and he's still dropping dimes all over the place in that game. So I go, he's been able to do that under that onslaught. You take that away from him now. And it's pretty notable of Geno that he hasn't fallen into that range of the ghosts or feeling that. Was he feeling the Steelers game where you saw him dancing around TJ Watt through the end of that game, Stone Forsythe over there trying to hold up on his side? No. And that's part of why I have so much support of Geno and being good in this. But I do agree to your initial point that as well, that Sam still has a lot of potential here. He was coming in at one point in a draft as we were about to head into a college football season of him and Rattler, who's going to be 1-2, and I'm talking overall here, because he had that kind of season you talked about 3 years ago. Final point being, what system was he in that 3 years in that time? I believe his sophomore year, spread system. What system is he going back into now? Spread system. So both of these two guys are going back to their origin stories a little bit, in my opinion. Geno from his West Virginia days, and Sam going back to his Carolina days. And I think these kind of offenses fit their skill sets.
Well, and that's been the interesting thing if you watch this preseason with, everyone talking about Ryan Grubb and this vertical passing attack he had at Washington. They're going to push the ball down the field. And I think they're going to. But the thing that I like so much is the variation in formations, the ability to move guys around and show the quarterbacks who your matchups are. Like there's been a couple times where you watch Sam and it's like he knows exactly where he's going with the ball and the guy's by himself wide open. And I get defenses are playing vanilla and so on and so forth. But the thing that I'm liking what Ryan Grubb's doing is he's running a lot of RPOs and giving them those easy throws where under Shane Waldron, under I think Brian Schottenheimer too, we struggled to give that to our quarterbacks. And you saw Russell having to scramble around back in those days and move around. And like you said last year, with Geno, he's trying to do that behind such a bad offensive line. And that's the thing I think Ryan Grubb started to realize through this training camp process and coming in is, look, the O-line is not going to be perfect this year. We still have to add pieces to it to get it to where I need it to be to fully go downfield. But here's a way we can mitigate the impact on our quarterbacks is let's give them quick and easy throws. Let's run some RPO stuff with Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh, whoever, and get the ball out of their hands quick. Like the play that, he threw the seam on, it basically was a full empty set, and he just went boom right down the seam because Ryan Grubb gave him that easy look by moving the running back out of the backfield, out to the edge of the formation to pull the linebacker out for him to make that throw between the safety and the corner. So that's where I think we got an upgrade too, is Ryan Grubb understanding what do I have in my quarterbacks and what do I have in this offensive line? How do I scheme things to our advantage when we are missing pieces to that offensive line that may not be there or may take half a season to develop, like a Christian Haynes.
Great points on your part. I think it comes down to those manufactured ways to keep your protections clean. Michael Penix rarely hit at Washington. Was that because he was such a he could move in the pocket, but an exceptional scrambler out there. He's not creating or improvising much back there. He's trying to let it rip. And it's because, like you say, the design of the plays, and it's a good point on your part. People do get caught up on the shot plays and Adunzie and Jalen Polk and down the field. But it is at the heart of it a spread system. A spread system is going to just get the ball out of the quarterback's hands at its base. What he's done is like a 7-layer cake, just kept adding extra layers on top. So you mentioned the shot plays. That doesn't traditionally go to spread systems. Spread systems, think back to the Brady days with what he was rolling with Welker and company there, right? They had like 3 slots on the field at one time. Everything's a damn out route, option route, 7 yards and a hitch. So he's taking shots because he knows what teams are going to do with that is they're going to come up with their coverages. And that means I will have holes over the top of that point because they're going to want to take those routes away eventually. So once every 8 plays at Washington, he's taking a shot play. Then here comes the next layer, screens. Once every 7 plays, you're going to get a screen pass. What does a screenplay do? Keeps that pass rush kind of, I'm I want to pin the ears back, man. I want to tie these suckers back and let it rip, but I got to kind of wait and make sure they're not going to catch me on the back because it's a 50-yard game, especially a guy like Walker or Charbonnet loose out in the open field on their side of it. So then here's another layer. You mentioned the variations, which I think is another great point on your part. How you're constantly changing every look you're seeing down in and down out, and he just attacks you all over the field. That's really what he's trying to contextually do to you, I think, playing and play out, is it's not about doing one thing or the other. And so many offenses, I think, are more structured into, okay, we do this, and then we do that to that. Like our prior offense was A gap, B gap, A back, E gap, take our shots over the top. Or Russell become a magician back there in his heyday. And that was pretty much it. That was pretty much, Lord knows we couldn't run a screenplay. Lord knows we weren't going to run any pre-snap motion, much less variations on those formations where they'll reset twice, right? Which I love to see, where you do it the once and you see those linebackers are going, okay, I got it set. And then here comes this late guy motion like they did on the Brady Russell touchdown a couple weeks ago. And then the linebackers are, wait, there's another guy moving. I got to keep my eyes even more on that. It's a night and day difference. And I love this offense because of it.
Yeah, Brownie, you just mentioned the pre-snap motion, and this is what's so exciting about coming into this year with the Ryan Grubb offense, because when you look at it, we essentially are rolling out the same offensive players for the most part, right? You got the same starting two backs and DK, JSN, Tyler, no offense back. Not too many times do you kind of come back, roll it back with the same personnel and almost feel like you got a completely different personnel. Who are you really looking for on that offense to have just not even just a huge year, just a breakout season and a big contributor on that offense?
I think you do touch on a big point to definitely answer your question, but you do touch on a bigger part of the point here, being the maximization of the personnel and whether this team, even as good as they've been over the last 2 years, has underachieved just a little bit. I had an interview with a former general manager, Randy Mueller of your Seahawks, who said that very same thing to me. So it's not just a fan saying it out. It's not somebody that's been in the field looking at this personnel from this team that's got a bit of a dog in that fight. Still, a fan. So I think there's a truth to that. I think you hear some of the stories about the process of the way that Carroll looked at his offensive coordinators, and I think had a little bit of an exertion of control over the top of them that was probably a little bit too much. We heard reportedly that Schottenheimer inherited 70-80% of his playbook when he walked in the door. I joke, he walks in and he's like, Carroll, I want the job. You got the job. He's like, okay, here's my playbook. And then Carroll rips 3/4 of it out, throws it to the floor and stacks his playbook on top of it and says, here you go. There's your playbook, Shotty. Enjoy. And then we eventually get to what with those guys? A mutually parting of ways, right? After a weird playoff game where there's a 4th down call where they can't quite get it on time, almost as though the coordinator called one play, but the coach didn't want the call. So if you had that level of control over the offense and it was a defensive-minded head coach doing that, not throwing shade at Carroll, just defensive-minded head coaches have that predilection. You guys know it. Bryce, I'm sure you know it from your time of playing, man. They got that mentality where they just kind of look at the offense as a necessary evil sometimes and will limit it by that structure, especially in the name of being risk-averse. Don't want turnovers, don't want to target the middle of the field, let's say. Motion, like you said. To get back to answering your question, I think that's a real key to this team this year a bit, Ryan. But to get to your question, I think that you're just going to better maximize the talent. Jackson Smith and Jigba had 70% of his targets last year, either behind the line of scrimmage or within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. Why do you have him not? When they ask him at a combine interview, what he thinks of Waldron, and he's got a stumbling answer of, is this live?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got good hair, I guess.
Yeah.
It's because you're not utilizing that guy right. And then, you flip it and look at the stats on him, by the way, when he was pushing beyond 9 yards on the routes he's running, on the depth on those routes and how good he was on those routes. Think to the Niner game with the Eagle game over the top on the winner. He was tremendously efficient on that, but you didn't run it. Again, some proof it would seem like a better. So Jackson Smith's going to be one of my guys. I think gets up around that 1,000-yard mark. I think DK and Kenneth Walker, though, explode. Yeah, I think DK has been heavily limited. He's not been featured as a number 1 wide receiver. He's not been moved around. He's been put in a position where you can bracket coverages, but like nothing else. And if you're getting double teamed all the time, it's kind of going to get hard to get open as a wide receiver, especially when you're going off press coverage as the X. Because he's got to be on the ball all the time. So he's getting the press and he's strong enough to fight through it. But first I got to get through the press. Then I've got the safety coming down and rolling over the top of me. And I've watched countless all 22 over the last few years with DK Metcalf. And I can't tell you how many damn times I watch where you're seeing this safety just every time, even if it's at 4 or 5 steps, just always rolling, always rolling, always rolling. So now into the slot, now in motion, like you just mentioned. I think if he can stay healthy, he's in for a 1,500-yard year. And I think Walker cumulatively is in the same kind of place. Another guy not utilized right. Same thing you apply to Jackson Smith, apply it to Walker. He averages outside tackle numbers. You can find the statistical data Get him on runs outside of tackles. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry. He's averaging 3.8 yards per carry in between the tackles in his career. So if I was to ask you guys to make a guess here about what is the higher percentage of runs Walker has had and what that percentage of run was on those runs versus outside versus inside, what do you guys think they would be? Same kind of thing of a JSN, kind of a 70%. Yep, same kind of thing. So this stuff, I'm getting kind of the heart of this is why I think they will explode is I think that it doesn't take a genius on Grubb's part to look at that data and go, okay, we're going to use Walker on the outside.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to feature DK Metcalf. There's none of this, avoiding middle of the field stuff.
Well, the thing that was interesting for me when I was at the mock game and we started to see kind of some of the stuff at least in the 7-on-7 skeleton part of the session, when I saw, like you were saying, how DK got bracketed, and he's been bracketed basically since his rookie year, and teams figured out, hey, look, this guy's a monster. We have to roll someone over top. Was all of a sudden DK's lining up in the slot and Pharaoh Brown's outside at wide. Well, that completely changes how you align that, because now either a linebacker stepping out or a nickel that's generally not as big is going to have to play against DK in a lot more space for him to go outside, inside, whatever. And for me, I'm thinking, okay, Pharaoh Brown's out there, but that's because Noah Fant's sitting on sideline right now with a bad hamstring. So you think you could have a situation where I think Noah Fant's another guy that's going to go off this year, because I think he's finally going to get used how he should be used and not asked to. Same kind of thing we went through with Jimmy Graham. We bring in a guy in his draft year, Noah Fant, that was the number one receiving tight end in college football. Okay, cool. So he spent 2 years in Denver, or 3 years in Denver, and then he comes to Seattle. And no, we're going to make you block. Why are we doing this? Why do we constantly do this to ourselves? We get weapons, and we, like Pete Carroll had this thing of, we're not really going to use you for what you're known for. We're going to try and reinvent the wheel here. And it's like, no, let Noah split out wide, put DK in the slot, and see what happens. Do you really think a corner that's, 5'11", 6 foot, under 200 pounds maybe is really going to want to deal with a big-ass guy like Noah Fant running a slant pattern? Like, that's not going to be something he's going to want to have to deal with. And then to your point about Ken Walker, yeah, get him on the outside. That's where he was effective at Michigan State. That's where he's been effective most of his career. And then what did you do? You drafted a bruiser with Zach Charbonnet. Let him run down the middle of the defense once it opens up. Like, it's really funny to me because, like you said, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, hey, look, we have guys that can attack literally every aspect of a defense. We just have to actually put them in those positions to do that. Like you were saying about JSN and his bubble screen game. JSN's besides his bubble screen against Cleveland, which he took for a touchdown and we won the game on, was basically ineffective in the bubble screen game. But all of a sudden, when we're starting to run him vertically down the field, the Eagles game, the 49ers game, JSN starts making plays. And the thing for me, when we drafted him, the immediate game tape that I went and watched, the Rose Bowl. How did Ohio State use JSN? They let him vertically attack a team down the seam all over the field and just let him go to work. We all of a sudden went, no. We're not going to do that with you. We're going to have you run everything under 10 yards. That's what you're going to be. It's like, no, that's never what he was designed to do.
They tried to turn him into Debo, wouldn't you say? I mean, like, that's what they thought.
Basically, yeah, but he's not Debo. He was never going to. And that was the thing. It was like, I looked at JSN and I thought, here's a physically upgraded version of Doug Baldwin is what I kind of looked at when I initially saw him. I went, this guy's going to fit kind of what Doug did. Doug was great in the seam. He was great on the quick outs. He was great at just getting to space in areas where a defense had gaps. And they were usually big chunk plays. And it was like, all of a sudden, it's like we forgot that Pete had amnesia and forgot that, hey, I had this receiver called Doug Baldwin. I've almost got a guy that's similar build, skill set, probably has some better skills in regards to what he's capable of doing. Let's start using him the same way. No, it was like, no, we're just going to run him on these little things behind the line of scrimmage that don't work unless you have an effective running game to begin with, which we didn't have. Yeah. So it was just like we were basically shooting ourselves in the foot all season and just hoping things were going to work.
It's I think it's the stagnation of what was going on with that offense in Carroll. I think he had an outlook on what he wanted his offense to be. It's a very, he had that really refined down from decades, right? I'm not just talking about, it's like one of those pictures like a Monet, you look at it from afar and there's not much detail. I mean, I'm talking detail. And he really had that certain kind of hard line and it got him far. Like, I'm not trying to throw this on being shade on Carroll. I just think that it reached a point where it just kind of ended up being kind of a negative. I've referenced it being like you have arteries that have been clipped. Is the body as a whole diseased and rotting? No. Is there blood flying out? And is there reasons chickens kill people every year because they hit that femoral artery in the thigh and out you go? It can take you down. And that's what we kind of saw from this team, I think, in recent years, is not that it was a bad team or not talented or capable, but that because of some of these things you're talking about in that, you were bleeding these things out. 32nd at targeting the middle of the field, Bryce. You know, I mean, if we talk about Noah Fant, JSN, if I just tell you just without anything else, Bryce, I say Jackson Smith and Jigba, slot, Noah Fant, tight end. You're going to target the middle of the field at the 32nd rate. We're going to go through 17 games, predict their production. Probably going to be aligned out to what you kind of saw, isn't it?
Yeah, to me, it was just like with both of those guys, like, yeah, we're going to attack the middle of the field, but I never felt that we did. And that was the thing that drove me nuts. Like that's 30 seconds.
That's totally a true stat. That 30 seconds, because I locked on it initially, and it drives me crazy because it's not 26th or 27th. It's not 30. It's the 32nd rate in football. And when you look through a yearly basis on this, if I go to 2023 and 22, 21, 20, it's going to be right up in that same territory, much like a lot of the other stuff statistically that you can align to Coach Carroll, like pre-snap motion, Ryan, you mentioned, or use of the screen game, or working the run games to the outside versus the rest of the league, or the lack of blitzing, or the lack of man coverage concepts and mixing it up. Or here's another one, 32nd in the league at changing coverages pre to post snap. Again, you're that extreme in a way. What that means is other teams can predict it. Other teams can get ahead of you now in the chess match of this game, and they can defeat you before you've even walked on the football game because you're that far behind the 8 ball, in my opinion. And I may be extreme on this, but I just think you can't take that many things statistically certain as to what you do on a weekly basis and expect to overtake your opponent.
Well, this is the only way I could say that you could overtake it. And it was exactly what we had that first, 20, end of 2011 through to 2015 era there for Pete. When you had Hall of Fame level talent on defense, you could get away with it because they would make plays that the average player or the decent player wasn't going to make. Offense, when Russell was a new economy to the league and his ability to use his legs and get through that whole thing about scrambling and extending plays, and all of a sudden we're taking these shots. That's how, like you're saying, we were this, realistically, this is what we were, but we were covering it up with these amazing abilities of these players. For me, 2017 was, I thought, an actual good time to potentially move on from Russell and Pete then. And there was a talk with, I think it was Jay Glazer saying Pete was possibly stepping away. Russell at that point was 98% of the offense that year. Our only rushing touchdown came from J.D. McKissick outside of Russell. And I looked and I went, this isn't working anymore. Teams have caught up to what Russell does, and they've taken things away. And Pete's Legion of Boom is falling apart. Richard Sherman had gotten hurt. Cam Chancellor had gotten hurt. Earl had gotten hurt at that point. And you could see the cracks in the armor. And it was like, these cracks are no longer just little. They're getting bigger and bigger. Like, we are losing chunks of our armor now. We need to start moving in the right direction. And that's when he cleaned house with Bevel and Cable and all those guys, and went and bring in Norton and Shoddy and all these guys. And it was like, you literally just went and got rusted armor from the Salvation Army store and brought it and put it back on your suit and said, yeah, we're good to go again. Like, look, we look all brand new. We're not cracking anymore. It's like, no, you just got rust all over you because this stuff's going to fall apart in a year or two, which it did.
Yeah.
But when I look at one thing you said about the defensive-minded head coach, and this is for me where I look at Mike McDonald so differently than like a Pete Carroll defensive-minded.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't go with anybody in his circle. That was the thing that I found so interesting with the coaching hires was he goes and gets the most innovative offensive mind right now in college football and the O-line coach and gets them to come to Seattle from the Huskies or from Alabama, wherever you want to say they came from. He goes and gets the D-line coach that's working with Parsons and then down in Dallas with the guy that's running one of the top defenses in Dan Quinn, who evolved out of the Pete Carroll scheme, but brings that guy in. Brings in all these different pieces from all over with all this knowledge, and then goes and gets probably one of the best secondary coaches in football in Leslie Frazier, but also a guy that can help guide him. And so for me, the thing I found so interesting about John Snyder going out and doing this was the parallels to when the Rams hired McVay. They hired McVay and brought in Wade Phillips to be that liaison for this is how you go through being a head coach in the NFL now. And it allowed McVay to focus on the offense and not have to worry so much about the defense. He had a seasoned guy there. I think McDonald's done that in a similar sense with Ryan Grubb. Yes, Ryan Grubb doesn't have a whole bunch of NFL experience. He has 0. But the NFL game is so much closer now, offensive-wise, to the college game, which is why quarterbacks you can see can play so much quicker now in the NFL than they used to be able to. I don't see a massive learning curve for Ryan Grubb. Like, everyone keeps saying, oh, we got to wait till what he sees, like week 6, 7 teams will adjust him. I don't think that's going to be as much of a concern as people are making it out to be.
I agree. I think there's a couple reasons for it. One of them being that he's come into a very filled up room. We didn't just start this rebuild this last offseason. We're heading into year 3 of it, and the talent that's been assembled around with that rebuild. And that's going to help Grubb. I do think, and your point, though, was not about the talent. It's about whether you can bring with his X's and O's. And I think that it's not going to be a problem there because he's not rigid to air raid concepts or your West Coast offense. He's not rigid in his scheme of using the wide hash marks, and I'm leaning on that fully to be good in college, and now that's removed from me, and I'm going to suck at the pro level. He's not that kind of guy in what you see from on the tape. He's willing to attack everywhere on the field. He's got routes to attack everywhere. If he catches a defense leaning this direction, he'll attack you on the other way. He's not going to overthink it at times, and I think that's going to work. I think you made a good point, too, just to touch back a little bit on that with Carroll, and that this is what you got to do, not just as Carroll, but as a coach in this age, which is you got to evolve and continue to change and be willing to be a bit on that cutting edge. And with Carroll, all the way down the line from his hires to a guy like Cable had the teeth and fangs removed from him when they took the cut blocking stuff. The backside cut blocks were taken out of the game. That really took a lot of what he could do. And then you had that at the same time, those athletes being removed that were coming out of college because everybody's going to the defensive line, that everybody's patty caking on the college level with spread blocks and nobody's getting in there and that pissed Cable off. Okay, we got to pivot now. And he didn't want to pivot for years on that. And the in-house hires of defensive coordinators finding yes men. Talking about the Schottenheimer stuff with that. He wanted to remain in this kind of place he was in. And I'd even offer on that Legion of Boom team, they had all those things you mentioned, but there was one extra thing that they had that's even another tougher thing to find now that wasn't maybe as much 10 years ago. The buy-in. Those guys were living together. Those guys were breathing together. Those guys were talking shop constantly about ball. They weren't. So not only do you have a Hall of Fame talent, you had those guys interconnected. My theory is on this is that they could run those simplified coverages like they did at that time. Yes, because of the elite talent, but also because those guys could look over with a wink and make an in adjustment that was not in the playbook in the moment and cut something off at the knees right then and there because of that communication they had. And you're not going to replicate that again. You're not going to see that again. That's why it is a legendary defense. That's why it is a one-off. So you've got to be on the cutting edge. You've got to do all the things you can be doing. And you said the thing about loving the hire with him, I love this with Grubb, because so many of these defensive-minded coaches go that safe route, man. So many of them go that like, okay, you're going to come in, you're going to run the ball. You're not going to turn the ball over. You're not going to do any wild-ass stuff here. You're going to keep in the pocket here, right? And he didn't do that. He went the opposite way, didn't he, Bryce? I mean, he kind of went, Ryan, he kind of went into that place of, I'm going to go for the guy that's going to put points on the board. I'm going to go for the guy that's going to score. This ain't about bleeding clocks, running balls. This is about putting points on the board because that's how you win. And I'm doing everything I can do as a coaching staff to help my players to win. And that includes not having a restrictive offensive scheme while I've got this great defensive scheme. No, all oars in the water. Everybody's going to try to make this thing happen. And it gives you confidence in him to me. It might not work, but I love the hire. And I think it will work. But I love it. Even whether it works or not, I love it because you're swinging for the fences here. You're not trying to hit a single with this offensive hire. You're trying to put it up in the second deck. And to me, I think it's going to work well with the personnel. It's going to work at the pro level, but it also is indicative to your bottom line point. It took a long way to get around that, Bryce, but that it's a great hire in part with McDonald because he's showing that willingness is so unusual for defensive-minded head coaches.
Yeah, Brandon, you talk about, just swinging for the fences, 180. Going in a completely different direction. That's what we love about it. But, switching gears over to the defense, Mike McDonald, and you talk about the Legion of Boom. And we've discussed no, there's no Legion of Boom 2.0. There's no this. Let's stop comparing these guys at all because they're a legendary defense. And the buy-in was huge. And that's what we're trying to focus on now with McDonald. What's the buy-in going to be? So far, it seems like a lot of these young guys and just even veterans are responding to Mike. It looks more like structured. Guys are more motivated. We were looking at a couple of individuals like Reek Woolen and guys like Draymond Jones and guys that just didn't have great years last year. Reek just had a weird year, didn't tackle. But then you were like, let's wait till Mike McDonald gets his hands on these guys. Has a different type of message. What are you seeing collectively from the defense just through camp and these preseason games? Just that overall buy-in, and Mike just seems like you talk about the practices and the fighting and the different attitude. What are you seeing the biggest difference from McDonald compared to Carroll with just that overall say buy-in now? At this point, Bryce brought up the buy-in and you brought up the buy-in 10 years ago when the Legion of Boom was around, but those days are long gone. Now, say the last 5 years of Carroll to McDonald now, what's the biggest changes you're seeing there?
Well, I think you'll never get that. That's what makes them that legendary defense. I think there's 4 or 5 in NFL history in the last 60 years, and why we should celebrate that defense for what they were, because you just don't get that. And you can still have a great defense. You can still have a Triple Crown winning defense like last year from Baltimore. There's a lot of people buying in, but to that level, that degree, I don't know we'll ever see kind of that case of it. Leslie Frazier, a guy that Bryce mentioned, I think that there's a lot of, as he said, the echoes of that to the Rams situation. I agree with that. How did McVay get that Rams team to buy in on him as a non first-time head coach coming into where they had not a winning tradition there? They're moved to a new city. How did he get the buyers played in? Because you can't fake the players out. I think this is a little bit of what caused what felt like a lack of buy-in last year, is the players knew we're getting out chest matched every week and we have to overcome it. That's not cool. You're not going to, you're going to fool the players on that? They can tell. We're in a cover 3. They just hit us with a 7-yard out route. We're in cover 3. They just hit us with a stop route. It's not hard for you to see how players start to kind of get that checkout process. So how do you get the modern player to check in? I think by the proof being in the pudding. And they go, man, I don't know how this thing works. When I'm doing it, he's doing what he tells me to do. It's actually working when I go to where he tells me to go. And a Leslie Frazier guy is the overarching part of this that gets to be a bit of that elder statesman of, hey, I'm sensing that guy going off the rail a little bit there. Like that in line. Or, hey, this fight today with this, how do we deal with that? He allows him, as Schneider said, to see around corners, as Wade Phillips did with McVay. And I think that that's going to also help him out here. And to your point about the press conference, he looks so comfortable. He looks so locked in. You don't sense a nervousness. I know this is kind of us trying to kind of read him a little bit, but I think you can kind of read. We remember the Nick Sirianni press conference about watering seeds and plants and that whole weird thing. And he's turned out to be kind of a weirdo a little bit at times, with him on the sideline. So you're not getting those vibes. He's buttoned in, he's locked in, and the players do seem like down the line from Witherspoon to a man, they talk about how smart he is. And I think there's something in that when every one of them is talking about what there is, that it's resonating with them. And when they're in those behind the scenes off the field and he's going through those X's and O's, we're like, whoa, okay, yeah, I can see how this works with the detail he's getting into with this.
So, Brandon, with that being said, out of this group that now on the player side, that on defense that Mike McDonald's got going, what do you think of this linebacker core now that Tyrese Knight's played a few games? Jerome Baker's obviously been injured and hasn't really done much at all since his year in Miami, really. Like, he's barely been at practice for us. What is the feel you're getting, because like McDonald's had some I'd say interesting comments in regards to Tyrese Knight after these first 2 games. John Radigan's played like a man possessed all of a sudden. Like, he actually looks like an NFL linebacker, which I didn't think he was going to be one after watching. Like, I thought he'd just be, another Heath Farwell special teams guy.
Isaiah Kazavinsky.
Yeah, exactly. One of those guys. And he actually looks like, there were a couple times where I was watching the Chargers game and even in the Titans game, and I'm going like, man, he kind of almost looks like Lofa a little bit to Tupu in the way he moves and shoots the gap and gets right in there. What do you feel about this inside linebacker core for one, and then the rest of this grouping of D-line to secondary as a whole? How do you feel about this whole defensive unit going into the season?
Well, my biggest worry in the team as a whole coming into camp was the backup inside linebacker position / kind of starters. I think that loomed over the top of other positions of not just where you were with the starters, but the depth. It could become problematic. I share your exact thoughts on Radigan in that I didn't expect anything from him coming into this year. Back end roster guy. He's been very impressive. He's looked a little quicker. He's looked like he's been in an NFL weight room for a year and benefited from that and really taken a step forward. Not all players do in this way. And I think he kind of has. Tyrese Knight is a guy that looks like might make me one of my more recent misses in draft history. I didn't get a chance to see as much tape on him with UTEP because there's not as much tape out there on UTEP. And some of the stuff I watched was a little bit not always great. It didn't seem instinctual, kind of just the body language wasn't always good. And he's just kind of like a low-key guy out there, but he gets it done. He's been tremendously impressive. He was awesome in the first game. I didn't think he was had maybe a little bit less of a game in the last one, but not bad at all. Good tackler, good in coverage, seems well-rounded, good size, good build. Kind of looks like a little bit of like a poor man's Devin White out there a little bit with his size to him and his length and his speed and athleticism. He kind of moves a little bit like that guy. I like him. And so he seems like he can be a bit of a hammer going forward. It's giving me a little bit more, okay, maybe we'll be okay here. I think Dotson is a guy to be very encouraged by, because that's a guy that when you look at him last year popping in one of the top rated players by PFF at the linebacker position, you go, well, okay, was he a 1-year wonder and he just kind of benefited from a small sample size? Well, then when you look at the Buffalo Bills situation there, Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds the year before, you get one of those situations when you draft for value like we have the last 3 drafts, you'll stack a position up and you might have a really good player who just finds himself stuck behind 2 other really good players in front of him. And that doesn't mean he's bad or he can't be actually a really good player. It just means he's having to kind of wait his turn. And you've seen this happen in certain spots. And I think that's going to be what we're going to get a benefit here with Dotson on, is he's a player that is ready to pop, who's just been kind of stuck behind the depth chart with those guys. And so I like him. The rest of the defense, I'm looking for him to get to middle of the road. I'm trying to do that thing. You guys are probably trying to do the same when you're in this content creation business of being balanced and not getting too much into your fandom of like, oh, it's on today. It's on. Look at that. It's coming together. No bumps in the road this preseason. 3 points against Chargers. Mentor beats the master. What's up? Already gone. So I'm trying to tap my brakes a little bit with this. With that said, we come back to the same things we talked about in the offense are very true of the defense, and that there are advantages we can all go through one by one that are those easy advantages for this team to just pick right up off the table and say, yeah, let's use that. Blitzing. Oh yeah, let's use that. Changing coverages, pre to post snap. Oh yeah, I think I'll use that. That doesn't cost me anything to use that. There's no price to be paid for that. There's no, what the downside? It's like pre-snap motion. What's the downside of pre-snap motion? Have you had to hear anybody tell me what it is? Why? So why don't we do it? Why are we so stagnant at the drop? Why do I got all my receivers and nobody's moving? Why? This doesn't make sense. So the talent's there. You've reinforced the front 4. It's good all the way through. If the linebacker position can hold on, maybe there's some hope that they can get up even this year into that top 10 state. But I'm trying to be realistic and say,
yeah,
top 15 is a big jump from where you've been. Shore up the run game woes, which have been league worst the past couple of years. And I think that will take this team really far, because the offense, I know, will carry its end of the bargain with as talented as it is. And then you have a good special teams unit on top. So it would all kind of, I think, work together to bring out the best in this team for this year, because that's what we're all kind of looking at right now is we're going, okay, we're supposed to be patient. We're supposed to sit here and wait. It's supposed to take a year, new coach, all this onboarding to do. But at the same point in time, you go, but all that talent, but all those easy advantages, but it's that, I don't know about you guys, if you're feeling the same thing, but I'm feeling a bit of the pull on both ways where I'm trying to be realistic, but at the same time going, yeah, but in the realism phase of this, there's all this stuff here. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, Brian, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, because we talked actually, even last season, if this team can just have a middle of the road defense, the how much better this team can be. So if you look at it and you kind of look at, Mike's timeline in Baltimore, kind of took a bad defense and got him sort of middle and then number 1. So, this year, if they kind of, let's, like you said, pump the brakes a little bit on the expectations, but you shore up the run, which is the biggest thing that we've had issues. I mean, it's just been terrible. So if you get them in that sort of 15 to, middle range, and like you said, we're excited about this offense, not to say we're not going to have some bumps in the road, but you kind of think that this offense should be a little better as well. So, those two things there, and you sort of mention expectations, and then you look at it, because you talk to a lot of guys at the beginning and you're like, well, let's not maybe throw a win total out there because, everything's brand new. But then you said, well, this team did win 9 games the last 2 seasons. So
10 the year before, I think. Weren't we 10 and 9?
But then when you look at it, you look at the talent, right? And we just keep mentioning names. We've mentioned so many guys on offense, defense. There's a lot of talent here. How does it come together? I'm gonna just throw it out there right now. What expectations do you have in this division right now? I know it's still a little early, but I mean, we're getting there. Do you have this team in a double-digit win mark? I mean, it's the division's tough. We know that. I mean, those Niner games and those Rams games, those are going to be tough. And schedule, you go through it. The first 2 games look winnable, but what's kind of your expectations right now as a whole with this squad?
Well, I think it's just double back on that offense. 8th most efficient offense in football last year, as it was, with the 28th worst pass protection, with a running game that was not consistent. You had a defense that had collectively, I believe, a game and a half extra that it played in collective snaps on the football field, which removed then those snaps from your offense, a collective game and a half, right? Inverse off one, pull from one, add to the other. And so this offense has been good. It's been good despite being limited in its functionality schematically, being limited in the amount of time that it's been on the field, limited in the pass protection, limited in the run. So what happens when all those things take an uptick? I think it does do a little bit to a degree of carrying the day here for your Hawks through the season with the talent that's there on that side of it. And I think you mentioned the schedule. Man, you guys remember the schedule last year? We had that gauntlet.
Yeah, the gauntlet.
That 7-game gauntlet where it's twice to the Niners and the Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens on the road at 10 a.m. And you go, I look at the schedule this year. Do you guys see that same kind of gauntlet? I don't. It seems pretty balanced and well. There's some tough games, but it's kind of peppered in rather than you got to go through a murderer's row in there or something. And so I was at 10 wins before we went and signed Conor Williams. I believe Conor Williams is worth 1 game extra because he takes what was the weak link on your offensive line, and they tell us your offensive line is as good as its weakest link, and you turn that potentially into one of the strengths on your offensive line. Now, some of this is going to hinge a little bit on the health of our right tackle position, and that we don't end up calling guys like Jason Peters off the couch at 52 years old to play right tackle for us. But I do see us now at 11 wins because of that. I've said it's a game better to me because I think Conor Williams is that good, and he takes that particular position, especially substantially so much over where it was.
Yeah, I think of, as this offseason's kind of gone on, we've seen Mike McDonald, we've seen this kind of come together. I was thinking 9 wins. Like I thought, okay, we're going to kind of be in that same ballpark we've upgraded our coach. It takes a year. The more that I've seen in these 2 games, I'm kind of in that same boat where I see 10 or 11 wins for this team because I feel this team now, with the ability to properly scheme against opponents, can steal some games they couldn't maybe have stolen in the past from certain teams that, like I look at the San Francisco game. Like I look at the Seahawks schedule right now. Week 6 to week 10 is kind of like our mini gauntlet this year. We've got the Niners, the Falcons, the Bills, and the Rams. Then we got to bye. That to me is like our mini gauntlet in that first part of the season because after that we play the Niners coming out of the bye. I feel more confident this year that we can steal a game from the Niners in like a 17-10 slobber knocker kind of game than we could have the last 2 years. I don't think we could have in the last 2 years, and we didn't. And so for me, yeah, I'm in that same agreement. I look at our team being 10 and 11. Abe Lucas, for me, switching a little gears to our O-line, Conor Williams, absolutely love that signing. And I think if he plays well enough, you have to look at re-signing him later on in the year to some sort of an extension to finally solidify that linchpin in your offensive line that we haven't had since Max Unger left. Abe Lucas is worrying me that he's going to start the season on PUP because and that's the thing that, I think Seattle kind of has to start looking at next year, potentially just a little forward jump into the draft to get a potentially new right tackle because I don't think you can trust Abe Lucas now to be a cornerstone on that side. Charles Cross, yes, I think he's going to be your left tackle if you sign him for the foreseeable future. The one thing for me, though, in these preseason games that's really concerned me is if George Fant goes down because McClendon Curtis hasn't looked great to me, at least by my eyes, as a right tackle. He looks better as a guard. And Stone Forsythe looks like he's gotten worse since last year even, and when he played for that chunk of period in time. Jarrell and Greenfield interest me as guys to keep because they're young. Greenfield looked pretty good as a left tackle. Yes, he's going to have his growth issues. He is a rookie. But Mike Jarrell looks like a guy that could have been a steal potentially because he was a Div 2 guy. Like he's strong. He doesn't get bullied. So for me, the depth at our tackle position really, really is worrisome to me. Like I'm more comfortable, ironically enough, with our guard position now with Bradford and Haynes and Lincoln Tomlinson and potentially McClendon Curtis in there and even Lamea in there. But that tackle spot worries me across the board if we lose either Cross or Lucas doesn't come back at all and we lose Fant.
I think it's fair concern on your part. McClendon Curtis is not a tackle. He's over there playing it because you don't have Lucas and they're putting bubble wrap around George Fant until the season. Yeah. And so that's why he's out there. He's not going to be even a potential out there. Stone Forsythe gets battered around a lot, and I get it. I don't think he's good, so I don't want to say that. I think he's functional as a swing tackle left to right and showed that last year? Yes. He's not going to move anybody off the ball in the run game. Let's just also acknowledge that. But if you're in a passing attack that's going to throw the ball 65, 70% of the time, which is what Grubb was at, put him in pass pro, put him on quick sets where he can use his length. He can be functional in a pinch is what I'm saying. To your point, though, if we're talking about getting to 11 wins, getting to the highest place of this team, if you've got Stone starting 16 games for you at right tackle, or Jarrell, or anybody but Fant or Lucas at this point, you're probably in some trouble. I think that's a pretty fair point on your part to say with it. And with Lucas, I think there is a bit of purposefulness with this, in that I don't think it's a matter of like the knees aching right now. I think there's a management thing here going on. And I think what I mean by that is that this new 17 game season and 2 Thursday night things, I think starts to instruct these teams a little bit in how they decide to unveil players like this. Let's give him the first 4 games on PUP. Now he's only got a 13 game season with maybe the playoffs, and we manage him a little bit on the load balance stuff of this a little bit. I don't know if it's the case. I have an instinct on that this might be a little bit of that at play. Because look, when he's been working out, he's not wearing the knee brace. He's lifting pretty good weight. He's on the sidelines when I was there at practice, walking around, no knee brace on leg. That usually tends to be a pretty good indicator of something still kind of dodgy in there, where they're wanting to keep it stabilized and as immobile as possible. So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too much in the tea leaves on this one. And Lucas is a big, oh boy, I'm sure you guys agree. The big, huge part of the success of this team in this year would be on him coming in, because he's a player and he's good. And what's nice right now with this offensive line, especially, and with Conor coming in, is you've not only got an offensive line you've improved talent-wise and depth-wise, you got guys that fit to what this scheme wants them to be able to do, which is move in space, climb to the second level, pull out in front. And all of them can do it. All of them have a background in doing it.
The interesting thing there, Brandon, that you talk about moving in space is our center position with Olu. Olu's not a move in space center, but the guy that they've kept in Jalen Sundell is a guy that's really interesting to me, because his score when he came into the combine is almost identical to Conor Williams. So it looks like Seattle may have actually found inadvertently their backup center if Olu doesn't work out.
It's going to be a tough numbers game here, man, with the roster. I'm sure you guys have already started to do it. Are you keeping 6 corners? Are you going 4 safeties? You pull from one, you got to give to another. It's the crappiness, in my opinion, of the way they set up these NFL rosters, where they should be at 66, 70 players, so that you can keep true numbers onto your deal. But that's the thing I'd wonder with that is, can you keep that guy in the practice squad? Because the Sundell is going to go there. I think you're right in that he's looked good too. I think they've had him at both tackle and center this preseason. And I think he's accommodated himself well there. While Olu at the same point in time, this preseason is yet to really come forward. This is part of why they made that move, is that he's not really getting better. And he was a guy coming out that had so much starting experience coming out that he was going to be what he was once he got to the pro level. It wasn't really like, here's a long-term development. He's set. The die is cast. He is what he is a little bit with that. And I give you that he doesn't have that natural, pure athletic ability to do the movement-based stuff. He did it well at Michigan. He executed because they asked him to do a lot of that stuff. When you watch Michigan between the 2 centers, the kid that came out this year versus him last year, it was night and day what they were asking Olu to do versus what they were asking this kid to do. But he is not naturally mobile, to your point. He's not naturally explosive. He's not really a mover out there in space in the way that he tests and functions out at that. So maybe they throw us a curveball in that final 53, man, where Olu gets pushed, where they want to go with the long-term upside guy that is the physical skill set to what you want in this offense, because you got to move in this offense. This is not your Mauling, Carroll days, Cable days. Take the guy in front of you and move him 10 yards. This is you're going laterally post snap. You got to go hit the reach block. You got to get in space. It's more finessey kind of blocks. So you need more of the guys that can move to do that.
Yeah, we love Conor Williams signing. It's just, you kind of look at this line and you say, if Abe's ready to go, Conor's ready, because there's obviously things he's got to work out. I mean, he's coming off an ACL. He's recovering pretty quickly off that ACL. So how is he managing when the lights are on and you got 300-pounders coming out? How's that knee holding up? Obviously, working with the line and Geno Smith. So, but the talent's there. So if all these things click, obviously Cross takes a step. You kind of get excited and say this could be a strength. But obviously a lot of question marks, and the reason why Conor Williams was on the market as long as he was as well. Talking about guys' contracts and which kind of future do you see here for Geno, as far as you look at him the first 2 years he started, first season, amazing first half of the year, then he sort of tapered off, and then last season kind of not a great first half, then he comes on strong, finishes off the season with a great second half. What do you think he has to do this season for the Seahawks to say, you know what, you're our guy for the next 3 seasons? Or does he not have to do too much and you see him kind of maybe giving him an extension regardless. Like it's already almost maybe planned out at this point. Like, maybe if he has just balls out, maybe that dollar sign gets a little bigger. But you see him regardless as our quarterback for the next 2-3 seasons, and maybe Howell's that guy they think might be in the wings, and we don't even touch the draft and go quarterback in the next couple, because that was the talk. Bryce and I were thinking, do we go quarterback later? Do we get a Spencer Rattler kind of guy in the draft and let him develop? But then since the Seattle just ignored quarterback again, obviously John Schneider doesn't draft quarterbacks. Do you kind of see them kind of going down this route where Geno's that guy regardless for the next 2-3 seasons?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of Geno Smith. I believe that, and again, I come back to quarterbacks and the supporting cast being a big part of what factors into their success. Supporting cast both being what you have as the talent around you, your offensive line, your coach, your defense, whether or not they're making you on the field after, like Howell had last year. We had to score every time he was on the field. These are all the factors that go into what bears out your position, how well you play the position. And I think that Geno's played really well, while you can take a lot of those factors working negatively against him at times over the past couple of years. And so if you can not only remove a couple of those things, but almost all of those things and flip them in the opposite direction, I think you're looking at a 4,600 yard year from Geno, 35, 36 touchdowns. And I do think that would get him on a contract extension. I think recently his people have pushed to the front office to try to get an extension going here. And I understand why they're probably wanting to do so, so he can get some security there. I don't think it really works in the Hawks' favor to do so, because there's 2 years remaining, and Schneider doesn't like to renegotiate with 2 years left on a deal. He's only done that you can count on the number of times on his hand that he's done that with a player. And so not likely to happen unless Geno's giving a tremendous discount. So he comes out, he balls out. I think it's a fluid situation from Schneider's perspective. He puts that season together, no problem giving a contract extension, and Geno's already showed he's willing to give a discount as he did before. He was the 17th highest paid quarterback last year. He's going to be the 16th highest paid quarterback. I'm talking brass tacks, bottom line, what you're paying on the cap this year. That's a bargain. That's a discount. Why would he not do it the same way as we go forward on this if he's already shown a willingness to do that? And so I think that that's a very good, I think if I was to say the likely potentiality between Sam Howell being your quarterback of the future or Geno Smith being the guy that signs a contract extension, I think it's Geno Smith signing the contract extension. Again, I'm a big proponent of him, but there's a reason you guys are hearing about him being a star at camp. There's a reason for that, or him balling out at camp like he is, because there's a big difference in the level of what you watch those two guys of where they're currently at. Howell's not a fix there, but this isn't a matter of like, oh, it's a race down to the wire here, and one guy's just edging the other guy. He's night and day difference. There are throws that Geno is making there at training camp. There's one throw I'm on the berm on watching, just blew my mind, where he's got Bobo operating off the slot. Bobo's going up the field. He throws the out route on a deep out, and Bobo's still running it like a 9 when he throws the out. And Bobo comes out and he turns, and that ball lands right here in his hands on the sideline. No toe tap, no chance for the defender at that point to read it off the throw, right? He's not waiting on break or anything like that. And there was just so many throws of that I saw in just the 2 days, even from Geno and watching him from it. And he's going to have a good year this year if he can stay healthy. And I think he's going to take off, man. I think I'm really also going to savor it too, because I've had to sit there for 2 years here sort of supporting him. And it frustrates the hell out of me, because I come back to it saying, name me a quarterback last year with that protection, with those offensive limitations, other than Mahomes or some magical elf in the woods, who is going to go on that team and take that offense and do what Geno did. 8th most efficient in football. 8th most efficient in football with those parameters. Name me another quarterback that's not going to be under onslaught. And I went through Bryce and Ryan. I went through and actually did some digging on this. I looked at those pass protection numbers for teams over the last 5 years that were 27th and deeper in the NFL. We were 28th last year. And I looked at every single one of those quarterbacks on those teams for that 5-year period and what their season looked like that particular year. Were they good? Were they bad? None of them had a good year. All of them were in the toilet with the exception of 1 year of Joe Burrow. And even in between that, he was getting his ACL torn in half. And it's just by the sheer luck of God, he's kind of been able to remain upright at times. They finally have gotten the offensive line invested now there for him. But that's indicative of the fact that no quarterback was going to be successful in that environment. And yet he was not only giving up, he was actually able to kind of carry the water for you a little bit. So I know I'm maybe a little bit alone on this, but I'm telling you guys, I think he's going to have a great year.
Yeah, no, Brandon, I agree with you. I think Geno in that situation with Hal being QB of the future or Geno, I think the Geno contract extension is a more likely thing. It was actually interesting because I did an exercise with the 12 Talk pod in the UK on quarterbacks and contracts and guys you would take over Geno. And we basically excluded the Mahomes, the Allens, the Jacksons, and Burrow. So we're like, no, obviously, yes, they're a different story altogether. Yeah, you'd have those guys because they're the elite. But once you started getting the tax it was like, you taking Trevor Lawrence over Geno? I said no. The only guy in that young bracket of younger quarterbacks in that, say, I don't know, 15 to top 5 range, there was one guy I was like, yeah, I'd probably take him just because he's a bit younger, and that's Jordan Love. That's the only one that I was like, this is the one guy, contract, where he is age-wise, what he's done in his little bit of time, where I could say, yeah, that's the guy. Other than that, like, I'm taking Geno over Dak. I'm taking Geno over a lot of these guys, like even Stafford. I would take Geno probably over Stafford because
I don't know if I go there.
The reason I say this is the reason I say this, and the part of it that played into it for me on why I take Geno over Stafford. You just talked about with Geno if he can stay healthy. Geno's been a relatively healthy quarterback. He has lower mileage on him hits-wise because of that time he sat on the bench. I love Matthew Stafford. I've been a Stafford fan since he came into the league, and I still think he has the greatest pro day of any rookie quarterback ever at Georgia. But Stafford is a walking Band-Aid right now. And you put him behind our offensive line. Remember, it's not like we're taking McVay in the rounds. We're taking Matthew Stafford and putting him behind our offensive line. I don't think Stafford's getting away with some of the sacks that Geno got out of. And I think there's a good chance that Stafford's potentially injured at some point throughout the year where we lose him for 4 or 5 games because his back gets injured, his arm gets injured, whatever. Yeah. And that was part of the exercise. It was not just, oh, yes, Matthew Stafford and his arm and what he can do. It was like take everything into consideration. Team, contract, everything. That's the only reason I really settled on Jordan Love. He can move. Ryan's a big Jordan Love fan himself. He was on that train last year that he was going to take off and blow up. That's the one guy I could say, yeah, if somehow Jordan Love became an option for Seattle, yeah, go get Jordan Love. Obviously, we know that's not going to happen. That's in a hypothetical world. But what did you make in regards to Geno of his Instagram post that he had the other day after the Garofalo news came out, obviously, about him and his camp approaching Snyder about a contract extension and so on. And he had his post that he then deleted. And I know it's social media and it's all this. But the one thing is everyone got wrapped up in the lyrics. The part for me that was most interesting was the little corner of this first thing where it said The Last Dance. That was the part for me that stuck out more than the lyrics and all that kind of stuff that was playing. It was that Last Dance part. That was the part I found the most interesting. What did you take out of it, if anything?
Hard to say because it's the new player way with this of, it's like the agents are instructing them. And so is it the player that's really thinking this stuff through deeply, or is it the agent saying, do something along these lines and this, this will help push this along. Let's get some public pressure on this situation to push this along. Because you understand from Geno's perspective of why he'd want a new contract. And you understand from the Seahawks perspective of why they wouldn't want to do a new contract right now. And so I think that this is just the negotiation stuff going on. I don't tend to get too wrapped up into it on that. And I think it's one like we saw with the Brandon Ayuk situation where it's like, if you get too much into that, it's like, today I'm gone, tomorrow I'm back, today I'm gone, tomorrow I'm back. And what's the truth? It's probably a process to get to the final of what really the truth's going to be on this one. I think Geno will play out this final year. And there could be a way that, you get, here's another scenario we haven't talked about with this, Bryce, is he goes out and throws that 4,600 yard year. And then the Hawks are like, yeah, that's great. We're going to roll with Howell and we're going to use you as it. We're going to flip you for a second round pick to a place that will pay you that contract you want now. It's part of another one of the benefits of, I think, staying on the contract through this year from Schneider's perspective. That's too tantalizing not to stay in this lane here with him, unfortunately, from Geno's perspective of it. So I get where Geno's coming from and wanting the deal done. I understand his, but John's got to kind of toe the line here. Our next year's cap right now is one we've got to manage. And so that doesn't mean just everybody gets a contract. We can't play Oprah-like cars with the situation. We got to be a little bit tactical in how we're spending out the money. And I'm a big believer you don't get too far giving out guys who still have 2 years left on the deal because they already have 2 years left of the bonus money still left on the prior contract. Now you're putting new bonus money on top. Now there's not any discount even in that first year of the deal if you do that kind of deal. It doesn't make a lot of but I love where you're coming from is why I didn't respond to it, Bryce. I agree with pretty much all your quarterback ratings on there, and I'd take Geno over that. You come back to supporting cast. Let's look at a guy like Jared Goff. Jared Goff sucks, has Fisher in there, gets the good coach, gets the good scheme. Gurley, offensive line from hell. Whitworth is your left tackle. Defense playing pretty good. Oh, he goes to a Super Bowl, 4,600 yards, goes to the Detroit Lions. Supporting cast, not kind of good in that first year, not the best of offensive coordinators. Ben Johnson gets onboarded as the offensive coordinator. Penny Sewell drafted in the top 5. Rebuild the offensive line, reinforce it. Now, boom, he's back up to 4,600 yards again. It's that same thing you see as far as the they go together hand in hand to me. And I don't get it why so many get lost on it, because there's even the average fan on this. I get almost stream over stream. I'll hear somebody mention just got to get that quarterback. Just go get the quarterback. It's like, it's like the end all be all solution answer. And I don't understand why, because there's so many teams you see do that. The Bears with Justin Fields. I mean, the Steelers with Pickett. There's so many horror stories here of going down this road where it's not the smart decision if you just turn it into an automatic mode. It's not automatic. It should be considering all these other factors before we get to the place of truly. And one other thing, Bryce, I think your point on maybe the strength and numbers thing here long-term with Schneider on the quarterback situation, there's something I think to that. And when you do back trace this to the Tavares Jackson, Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson situation where you were going to run with all three quarterbacks on the active roster throughout the season, we can go back to the Packer timeline and him often referencing, I would love to redo like we did with the Packer time. We've got kind of maybe the developmental guys that we can maybe eventually flip for a pick. Well, man, that was nice to be able to do that in the day. I think he's wanted to do that. I think he's been held up at times with the Carroll situation that was there. And then I just think also he hasn't really liked the quarterbacks that are there for him to pick in recent drafts. For guys landing to his native spot, I think he's just been kind of a little bit like not feeling it. And so he's also been just waiting to get kind of excited like he did with Russell back in the day.
I think there's one guy, I'll just ask this before Ryan's got a question, but there's one guy I think that he's interested in this draft coming up.
If you say Quinn Ewers, I'm out of here. If you say Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, don't say it because I want to keep running around a bit. And,
let's talk about Quinn Ewers. There's Quinn Ewers, I actually think is one, but there's one that I think he might actually be interested in that a lot of people don't know where he's going to go. Depends on his season. And that's Drew Allar out of Penn State.
Oh, okay. I'm not as well. I've looked at a few of these guys. I haven't checked him out yet, though.
So Drew, I'd go check out Drew because he is your big push the ball, kind of almost like a Josh Allen type, maybe not as athletic, but similar play style, able to push the ball down the field, and a big guy. And that's why I looked at him and I went, this is kind of, because I remember how much John was in on the Josh Allen thing and trying to make moves that year to potentially go get him. So that's why I know everyone's jumped on Quinn Ewers. We've heard it. I like Quinn Ewers, but I don't know if he's the guy right now.
I don't either. I hope not, too, because I've watched a lot of Quinn Ewers, and I don't get the fascination with that kid at all as far as people's outlook of him. I just don't. Like, they'll point to last year's Alabama game and go watch that Alabama game. Makes a couple of throws, and every other throw is a pop pass out to the flat. That's not going to blow my mind. It doesn't make me go, ooh, top 5 quarterback. So you threw it to Worthy on a go route, and he ran into the ball. Great. But his decision making and processing in the pocket, especially, and for me, the quarterback position, arm strength and processing are the two things that I look for in the QB first and foremost. I'd argue with him. I don't think the arm strength is anything better than NFL average at best, and I don't think that he's a good processor in the pocket. And I'm not really certain you can teach processing. I think you kind of either have. That's why when I go to arm strength and that's Bryce, you see it a former quarterback. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. That's why I go to those first two things, because I don't think those are teachable. I think you can kind of teach certain other parts of quarterbacking, how to handle the pocket, how to handle pressure in the pocket, but I don't think you can, really adjust those things. And that's why I'm so out on Ewers. On top of the fact he's not mobile, which you need mobility now in this day and age as a prerequisite. It's no longer it'd be nice to have thing. It's now kind of a requirement. You got to move around a little bit, not be Lamar, but
yeah,
he's stagnant back there. He's 4.9-ish, he's 4.9-ish back there on that side.
I mean, the one guy that actually Bryce and I were pretty set on, and talking to a couple other guys that we thought actually if the Colts didn't take him, was John was probably going to pull the trigger on Anthony Richardson there, but
I think Anthony had CJ Stroud too. I think they would have been both of those two guys if they had fallen to them. I think they would have.
Stroud for sure. I just think he knew he was going 1 or 2 there. So but Richardson was like, because shoot, this guy could fall to 5. But we got a stud at 5 anyways that we absolutely love. But I got one more question for you, and then Bryce has one. But
one question with you guys on this quarterback thing, real quick. Do you guys think there's any chance that we got a long term with the Allen fascination that existed with Schneider, that the Bills are kind of in this, I get a general feeling like with them of, have they maybe topped out in this run that they're underneath right now? Is it piddling out a little bit? Are they about to move on from the coach there maybe at some point? I know he's a little bit of an institution to a degree there as Allen in Buffalo so far, but is it out of line to think, we saw the Rams make this kind of creative solution with the Stafford a couple of years ago, that rather than it being about us looking for the quarterback of the future within the draft, if it's not Geno or Sam, that maybe there's that kind of trade they go out there and they look for on this open market that is a creative way to find that QB of the future that's just in a different mode? Or is that completely crazyville for you guys?
The only thing that I look at to get a guy, like if John's going to make a move like that to go get a guy potentially that instead of through the draft, go and get a top end quarterback, you'd have to find a guy. Like if you look at the Stafford parameters, you'd have to see a guy that's been beat up, hasn't had any playoff success, and wants to go for himself and win a Super Bowl. I don't know for Josh Allen if he'd be a guy that Buffalo would give up on. I think they'd give up on their coach before they give up on Josh Allen just because of his talent and skill set. You look at Justin Fields, he got moved relatively quickly after a couple of years of struggling. The thing for me with that is there's just such a small thing between elite and like truly like moves the bar guys to kind of everybody else. Like I look at the guys from about 15 to 7 ranking wise in the NFL. And I usually use the tier thing that Mike Sando comes out with, because I think that's a great like insight into where people see the quarterbacks. I don't see a gap enough where it's like, like those guys can't win Super Bowls. We look at Joe Flacco. He won one with a whole team around him. Joe Flacco was not an elite quarterback by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's why, like, I'm very similar with you, Brandon, on the sense of Geno. Like, I think Geno could, if we have all the right pieces and build the offensive line, like, he could be a guy that can get you to a Super Bowl, because Jared Goff got to one. Jared Goff is not an elite quarterback. He's not.
No.
So that's where, for me, like, I think you're better to try and get a guy and develop him and go that route, because you get the 5 years of his rookie deal where you can still get more pieces around him. And then if he is the guy like a Mahomes or someone like that, then they make up for certain games. Like they will win you games where your team's just being off. Like how many times have we looked at Mahomes and been like, yeah, the Chiefs basically played like absolute crap and didn't deserve to win, but Mahomes went out and made like 5 throws that won them the game. That was basically this last season. Their receiving core was horrible, and Mahomes literally with Kelsey willed them into a Super Bowl. That's kind of and that's why I never truly jumped on the Russell Wilson is elite bandwagon that everyone else was, because I looked and I went, yeah, but Doug's bailed him out a lot of times, and Tyler's bailed him out, and man, that defense was really good at Marshawn, and they bailed him out of some situations where it was like, oh God, like don't let, like the NFC Championship game against Green Bay, 4 interceptions. That defense doesn't play that way. There's no right that they go back to their second Super Bowl.
There were some miracles there too.
Yeah. They I think Russell didn't do the thing that Geno has done in the 10 years since he stopped being a starter with the Jets. And I call it the lonely work. You have a lot of the Instagram shots you get of these quarterbacks on the football field where the sun's shining and they're throwing all these pretty balls down the field. Notice you don't get a lot of the Instagram there with them grinding on the tape. And when you see a lot of these quarterbacks that get to 32, 33, 34, where Geno's at now, there's a rich history recently of these guys playing at a very high level, even as their skill sets start to diminish. Phillip Rivers or Tony Romo's or Tom Brady's or Peyton Manning until he fell off a cliff at 38, or Aaron Rodgers, or last year Kirk Cousins before he went down to the Achilles, you could say was having one of the stronger years of his career, and he's at 35 years old. And why does that happen? Because these guys have mastered the sport at that point. In 10 years, they've seen every blitz, they've seen they've adjusted every kind of protection. You can't fool them anymore. And I think with Russ, he never really made that jump. Some of it was the limitation of his heights, where he just can't play on time. He can't, see certain throws. But even that, Steve Young couldn't make certain throws. So they used to ask Steve Young, how you make these slant throws 7 yards where you can't see over the top to Jerry. You say, I'm throwing it blind to a spot. And that's the part never really came forward with Russ with the throw with the anticipation thing. So I agree with you. I think that's the part you want to look for in a quarterback. That's why I'm with Geno, is I think he has done that work. He's good against the blitz. He can see it coming. He can change protections. You feel he has a sense of control there when he's walking up the line of scrimmage over what's going on. And that's the thing that quarterbacks tend to have when they're 10 years into the sport like that, I think. Sorry, I think I interrupted you there, Ryan.
No, it's all good. I was really quick. I was just going to say, I know you touched on him and you expect a huge year from him. I'm a huge DK guy. And like I said, I've been so frustrated that, that they're not, to me, he's this number one guy and he can be a top dude in this league. They just, there was 3/4 of the game where sometimes he didn't even get a touch, and it's like, to me, you need to get that guy involved early and then often.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Dallas game, like just went off. Right. And that's what DK can do. That's how good he is physically, just everything. And sure, there's some things maybe he can get a little better at, but I mean, just physically, he's just better than you, right? So where do you see him in the future with this team? Do they go out and with the receiver market as it is, do they extend him and pay him big time and keep him around as a Seattle Seahawk for a few years here?
Well, boy, I sure hope they do. I share your feeling on it. He's a guy that is a little bit like Geno at times, where I find myself with some of our fan base trying to make the argument as to why this guy is good and why you shouldn't be chomping at the bit at times to look and try to flip him like an asset either, or get up in your feelings about the emotionality showed on the field. It's an emotional game. And if you had 53 DK Metcalfs with their mentality on the football field, we win a lot of football games. Agreed. It's not a bad thing. It's not a detriment. This, the doubling up thing, I think, is huge because it also goes in tandem with what I call the hack-a-shack rules on DK Metcalf. Go watch Jadarius Ward in the Niners game against DK Metcalf. Go watch the All-22 of just him and lock in on what he's doing as he's on DK. And he's mauling him up the football field. I'm not talking a 5-yard chuck here. I'm talking a 9-yard. I'm going to hold on to the back of your jersey and my little feet are going to be off the back like this type. Just mauling, and the officials let him get away with it. I don't know why they do. But I call it hack-a-shack because you guys know the reference on this being that they would used to let people beat up on Shaq because he's just so big. What are they going to do, right? He's just so big. What are they going to do? And I think there's a bit of that with DK where you combo that with the doubles. So you move him inside. Bryce, we're talking a little bit about this earlier on when you move it inside, the doubles on the outside are so easy because you get so many. We got cover 2 shells, the de facto of the day now, right? That's your standard issue, cover 2 shells, which makes it an easy, either side of the field DK's on, makes it an easy pull for that safety to get over and bracket over the top. But when you do move a guy in the slot, why are Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp and Amon St. Brown at times able to get open at will from within there? They have a great skill set that fits the working from the slot, definitely. But it's harder to double guys in the slot, isn't it? I don't have that natural ability to just bracket down that safety, or I'm probably going to leave something up over the top at that point. He can't see as clearly then to the outside off of what's going down the sidelines if he drives down on those routes. And so I think that's part of now you're getting him in a pure one-on-one or dealing with the linebackers like Bryce set up in the mismatch that becomes. And then you're just making him a focal point. You mentioned the men for getting him for 2 quarters. And what would happen with that, Ryan? You have the Baltimore game where you don't throw him for 2 quarters and you throw him a crosser and he goes for 50. And then you forget about him, and it's just like, what's going on there? I think fade balls. I think, again, we had a lot of restriction to how we ran fade balls. A story I often reference that just drives me crazy to hear it is Russell Wilson and Brandon Marshall working down in the end zone in a training camp on fade balls. One after another. Carroll's, what are you doing over there? He walks over, and they start having a conversation. And Brandon and Russ are throwing the fade ball differently than how Russ and Jimmy Graham threw the fade ball. And Coach Carroll wanted them to throw the fade ball like how Russ threw to Jimmy. But Russ and Brandon Marshall had a more effective way of throwing the fade route the way they were doing it. But it was probably, I'm guessing, more risky. I'm guessing the way that they were doing it led more of an open door up for that interception to potentially happen at that point. And I don't know if it was the last play of the Super Bowl game that just kind of set Carroll down the risk-adverse nature of this to the stuff. But that story stood out to me because hearing Brandon Marshall, and it was straight from Marshall's lips. This isn't a rumor or something. It's Marshall said it on a show. So it's him recounting this exact story. Is that not indicative at that point of why would you restrict that? This is the most effective way. They're working on it. They're grinding it out right now. And you're pulling that away from them because you want them to throw it like they would to a completely different player in the way that he did and his build and how he won down by the goal line. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think that kind of restriction gets taken off because I meant to pivot this. When you look at DK, guys, you guys noticed the red zone throws to DK over the last couple of years? Some of the throws, how they almost seem like you're going to throw it 3 yards out of bounds or nothing, or that it can't be at any risk of a pick. If you're throwing it, it's like maybe barely can be a completion or there's nothing happening. I feel like there's a bit of an instruction over our quarterbacks on that at times because it just didn't make sense sometimes. Well, we don't give this guy who's so gargantuan more opportunities down there, true opportunities to go up and use that size. He's not great at it. I'm not saying he's Calvin Johnson here in that ability to go up and get it like that, but it's also been underutilized a little bit, in my opinion.
The one thing, sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
No, you go. No, you go ahead.
The one thing I was going to say, I think my favorite red zone usage of DK came in 2022, where we were playing the Rams and they ran him across the formation. And Geno sprinted out and threw the game-winning touchdown for him because Jalen Ramsey had to chase him across the field.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be a fade ball to DK. He is a monster. Let him go through the middle of the defense and pop out on the other side and throw him on a crosser or a drag route. Like, it doesn't have to be this, hey, we're going to put you in this small little area and throw your fade ball. Like, use him for his size and his freak ability. Like, let him run bang routes, move him inside and let him run a slant across the entire way. Like, I don't understand, like, playing quarterback, coaching offense now as an offensive coordinator. Like, when I have a big weapon, I am running him any which way that I know I'm going to get a mismatch depending on what the guy's playing. And one of my favorite routes to run is the over and then sit. If they are in zone and there's a gap, just sit right in the middle of my quarterback straight. If that big guy runs and sits, throw the ball to him. It's nice and easy and makes it simple. We made it too four-dimensional in a box, basically, with what we're going to do with DK. Let the dude run free, and I think that's what you're going to see this year.
Yeah. Well, and that's that. You don't want to target the middle of the field. It's hard to run those kind of routes you just mentioned, right? If I'm hitting the middle of the field at the 30-second rate, those routes are getting pulled out of the playbook. And now it's to him operating off the hashes and winning outside the numbers. So I'm with you that he has this in his game to do it. It almost brought a tear to my eye this preseason. I was watching him run a little 3-yard drag route. It was like the old Indian in the commercial with just one little single tear drooping down. So I was like, thank you. It's glorious. You know, it was that meme where the guy's looking at the picture. I've been looking at it all day. It's it. And so I love to see he was doing it because I think he will be very effective in it. You remember that play he had? He ran a drag a couple of years ago around that time too, where he caught the ball and you're like, oh, it's a little 7-yard drag. And he just housed it. I think it was maybe the Niners or something. And he ran it and took it right up the field on it. So he's got that ability to do that stuff in his game. We just haven't used it. I think the reason I'm not using it comes down to a bit of that. I don't want to go to the middle of the field. I don't go to the middle of the field because I look at the base numbers. I think Carroll had kind of a base number chart that showed him turnovers and interceptions not happening as much outside here in the numbers. Interceptions happen in here a lot more. Tip balls happen a lot more in here because you're throwing those shorter routes. That's more of a chance for guys to get their hands up. And I think that risk adverse aspect of it ended up pulling them away from running those routes as much, but they're absolutely effective and they can make this offense better if you utilize them, especially DK. Just work him in the off, make him a focal point. 10 targets a game. We should have every game coming out of this with 10 targets a game. You should have manufactured touches in there with it. I'm not talking bubble screens. You know, get him those touches and make him that, and you'll benefit from it. I think you'll see this offense better forward if they do that.
Yeah, and one last thing too, you mentioned the competitiveness and people, oh, he took this penalty or he's getting it. It's an emotional game. I think a lot of that came from I think a lot of times he kept his cool. I'm a primetime guy. I'm your number one dude, and I haven't seen a football in 3 quarters. And then of course these DBs are poking at me. These guys are talking all the time on the field.
Yeah,
he's back in the huddle saying, "Can I get a football?" And it's just, to me, you went stretches of games where just where is the ball going? How come it's not going to DK? So people also got to realize that where some of that frustration can come from too, when he's not involved. And these guys are poking, they're told, get under this guy, poke at him. Let's go. Get him fired up. Get him taking a penalty. To me, that's a lot of it. So I think you're going to see maybe a little less of that because obviously we're looking forward to the future with Grubb's offense moving around. This guy, I think, I'd be surprised. I think you would too if he's not an absolute focal point game week in, week out. But really quickly, one last one before we let you go. Any surprise cuts that you think you might see?
Well, Daryl Taylor's a potential. I liked what I saw from the Titans game. He went with 3 rushes off the Titans game where he went spin move, then he came back, hit the bull rush, and then he came back and hit a ghost, 3 succession, which I really love to see from him for a couple of reasons, because he hasn't always had a multitude of moves he's bringing. Number one, just he wants to run around the corner with the speed and quickness. They were all 3 effective in how he used it in creating pressure. And he's got to be a rotational pass rusher if he's going to fit onto this team, because Lord knows that man is not playing the run. It's not happening. Don't expect it. It's never coming along. Don't hope for it. It's not happening. But he can be a good situational rotational rusher, maybe. And that's the part that to watch for. He's making $3 million. Nelson Cesar hasn't had a bad camp so far, and there might be a pull from John to save $3 million and then clip it over there for the cheaper kid that's the undrafted rookie free agent that he has club control over for the next 3 years on the roster potentially. So that's one guy that stands out to me. I think that would be maybe a guy. I think most of the guys are pretty well cemented in as far as when I've looked through it. Mike Jackson is, I think, or Trey Brown is a potential outside trade market guys where they look at the depth of the position. They don't want to cut one of these corners. They're only going to keep 5 corners. So they end up maybe moving one of the guys where that'd be more of a trade than a cut. And I just agree too on the DK thing. I agree with everything you said on that. I got no issues with any of the stuff he does, by the way. Yeah. we're getting in the place where football is getting softer and softer and softer.
Yeah,
and I'm going to be one of those damn people to just drive my feet into the ground and almost like a tantrum, like say no at times. Like, good. I'm glad he got after.
Well, Brandon, real quick, and sorry to cut you out. I brought up a point about the Legion of Boom 10 years ago when how much trash talking and shit did they say, and it was never an issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was only 10, 11 years ago.
So Brandon Browner picked Jennings up off the ground and threw him into the ground by his head there over the top of him. And good football back then. DK has his neck hit from the back, surgically repaired neck hit from the back by Fred Warner. And he retaliates as I would too. You almost ended my career. I'm a year away from making 130 million, and you just about cost that with the cheapest of shots. I don't get to react. This is a man's sport. These are men instituting their will upon another. I'm out here to beat your butt. I'm going to do that nice. No. I mean, the Bengal one that he got where he hit the Bengal guy in the block, like he said, hey, the play's live, get your hands up. And the Bengal guy's like, I thought we had an agreement, receiver, cornerback. We just patty cake all day. I thought we had an agreement.
Right.
No, I'm here. I'm playing. Good. Hit him. Now get your hands up, sucker. You're out here playing football. These are professionals. So I don't care for any of it. I say good more. And the people that get all like sensitive about it, I just go, whatever. Like I said, we got way more of these guys with this mentality in this team that cared this much and went this hard. You got a scary ass team on your hands at that point.
I love that, man. And on the defensive side, wrapping this up, Devin Witherspoon, right? I mean, same kind of mentality.
Oh, yeah.
Give me a bunch more of those guys' mentalities, and this team's going to have a lot of success. But Brandon, this was an awesome conversation, and we'd love having you on. And before we let you go, why don't you let all our listeners know where they can find your stuff and all that good stuff.
It's pretty simple with me. I'm just here on the Hawk's Nest on YouTube. I do a little bit of stuff over on Twitter, but it's just I'm old. I only got so much time, so I can only do one platform. It's the way it works as you slow down now. So I'm only on there really. I'm on Twitter as well. But if sub up on Hawk's Nest, you're doing good by me on that, and it's the main place you'll find me.
Awesome. Guys, go over to Brandon's channel and go give him a sub. And Brandon, again, we really appreciate it, and would love to have you back on in the future here.
Anytime. You guys are doing some great work on your side. As I always say with everybody in doing this, you stay at it, you stay on it. You guys have gotten through kind of that early period, which is the tough period for a lot of folks in this, because they get in the early period and they're like, go or not go, but it's just stay with it. That's the thing with this is just keep going and you will see, the returns in doing this. You guys already are. You guys are doing great work. And I want to see you guys just stay on it and stay going, So anytime you guys want, I'm happy to come on, and appreciate you having me in your house here and let me come in and chop it up.
I really appreciate that. Brandon, we'll talk to you soon, and we appreciate it. So go Hawks.
Hey, go Hawks, brother.
Go Hawks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Guys, that was Brandon Cain from the Hawks Nest podcast. That was great combo, man, with Brandon. We kind of touched on a lot of different things. Man, I love I'm going to touch on this real quick just because this is the last one. I loved his views he shares on DK. Like, I absolutely love it. Some guys say, yeah, he's good. He can take the next step. He aligns with what we like about DK, man. He doesn't care about any of that extracurricular. He thinks this guy can be a top dude and should be a focal point. And I think we're all in agreement with Grubb and this new offense moving all these pieces around that he will be. So that was one thing that really stood out with me. Among the other things, it was a great conversation. What really stood out with you there with talk with Brandon?
I thought one thing that was really interesting with Brandon was the discussion of Sam Howell and Geno Smith and how he really aligned with my kind of view on that whole, what our quarterback room is and why it's not really Sam versus Geno and this thing that people keep trying to make out. Like, Sam is a developmental quarterback. As the same kind of thing we're doing right now with Sam is the same thing Green Bay did with like a Jordan Love, that we just didn't draft him. Right. But we've gotten a guy that's young that we need to bring along. We've got a veteran guy in Geno. And to listen to Brandon kind of break that down was really refreshing for me, because it was like basically, right to my heart on exactly how I feel on that topic, how we've talked about it. And then I also liked his view on, how Carroll was versus what Mike McDonald is, and just how vastly different they both are in the way that they want to build their staff, the way they want to handle in-game situations, attack teams, all that kind of stuff. You can just see how different it really is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was an awesome conversation. Everything that we talked about, it was really insightful stuff. It was great to get his insight. Guys, go over to Brandon's channel and go subscribe to the Hawks Nest. Brandon Cain, he's been doing it, and we follow his stuff. And that's a big reason why we want to have him and come over here on our show tonight, and didn't disappoint, because he had a lot of good things to say, and it was really, really great combo talking Hawks with him tonight. But that's it for us. We got a couple pods coming up. We have Seahawks Nerd coming up this week, and then preseason rolls along. And then, man, we're not too far away from the season, man. It's coming quick. So, and you guys know that we're coming to you live after each game. So, yeah, go ahead, and if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. Come over, sub to the channel, and it's gonna be a fun season. So, that's it for us tonight. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.